Hey, welcome to Keys to Home, episode 10. We're seeing this on the 10th, right? 10 on 10.
Yeah.
Day after a big football game. We can't say what it is. I don't even have a dog in the hunt. I'll be watching commercials and eating food.
I saw a meme that said it was the United States, and it says these are the people rooting for Kansas City. It's this little dot over Kansas City, and these are the people rooting for the Eagles, and this little dot over the Eagles, and the rest of the country's like.
I just have to say there might have been more interest in the national championship college games.
Yeah.
The commercials have been underwhelming over the last couple of years too.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to a party, and like it's a themed party around New Orleans, so we're having like hurricanes and I don't know what all.
You see me perk up when you said themed and went.
Yeah. Yep.
You're gonna have a mask. You're gonna have like the what are those things they used to wear in Paris and France? The masquerade balls. So.
Yes, I have. Yeah, I have some of those because I've been to some masquerades.
Right.
I know that's not surprising, right?
I remember my run-in with drinking hurricanes in New Orleans one year.
Right, you felt like you'd been through one, didn't you?
The fact that I was walking up and down the street, not realizing that I was asking girls for kisses, and I don't even know if I got some.
And I'm assuming you didn't have a bag of Hershey Kisses.
It's not exactly.
That was a Halloween costume I did one year. I was the kissing bandit. So people are like, what are you? I'm like, I'm the kissing bandit. Do you want a kiss? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, here's a Hershey kiss.
Oh, the times of
Yeah, good times. So speaking of good times, what's everybody been seeing this week? Good times, crazy times?
Well, I got an interesting
Groundhog Day. Repeat.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I've got an interesting fact that I came across, and NAR came out with this the other day.
Oh.
In December, 43% of contracts fell out. In December, yes. 43% of contracts fell out. Now, I came in this morning, I discussed that with the staff, and we closed 62 loans in the office that month, and we had 6 fall out. So that's exactly right at 10%. Yep. But the way that we do business, and you can speak to this, Jennifer, the way that Fairway does business, when we send a pre-approval, we have everything. We're just before we started this call, we were talking about someone going forth a couple of weeks. We get their income, we get everything about them, so that when we put our name on it, people call us back like, okay, what do I need to do now? You need to not lose your job and be there for the closing. That is how we do it.
Can you handle that part?
Right.
And I don't. Time to what's that guy's name we talked about last week? Take this job and shove it.
Right.
Not the time.
But I think a lot of other. There's a million lenders out there. There's people with the lowest rates in town. Those are the ones that send the approvals. That don't have any teeth to them or don't work.
Well, I will tell you, I think that there were 2 other reasons besides financing that homes were falling out in December. Like I know from my transactions, there were a lot of contingent on sale that had, so you can do contingent on sale. You just have to sell it by the time we close the one you're buying. Or you can say you have to have it under contract within X many days because we don't want to be held off the market forever while you're trying to do your thing. A lot of homes came out of contract for failure to contract on the home that had to be sold to buy. A lot. And a lot came out under inspection. A lot of panicky buyers. And I don't know if they were using inspection as buyer's remorse or to try and get lower purchase price or more concessions. So I think that there was a lot of that going on too.
Yeah. I've had a lot of calls this last week from existing customers. They're actually looking to buy. I'll tell you, it's something we can talk about. Let's come back to it about something I want to accomplish with past clients, and I want Mark's opinion on that. But Jennifer, tell us what your week's been like.
So busy. I had a buyer close, 2 sellers close. The new buyers signing contracts. Other homes have gone under contract. So a lot of that I did. When you said stats, I wanted to reiterate something I said last week. I misquoted the stats on something. And I do want to revisit the Jared James stats about last year, 24. It was 74% of all realtors sold 0 homes nationally.
Wow.
2% sold between 11 and 20. I fell in there. And 0.14% sold 45 or more. So that is not what we're seeing this year. I feel like I'm like clanging a gong, out there, voice in the wilderness. First time buyers, people who are not as financially set, who want to get out, especially like if you have time, like if your lease doesn't expire for 9 months, you have time to get with Mark and improve your position as we come into a more competitive market. If your lease is up in 3 to 4 months, let's try to get you into something quickly, not rush, something that fits you, but so that you're not in what I think is going to be a really competitive spring summer market. And in Tennessee, somebody asked me, when's our slow season? We don't have a lot of slow season. We have August slows down a bit because the kids go back to school and everybody's like, I can't focus on anything. I can't try and sell my house when I'm like getting my kids in school, like complete myopia. But we still take contracts because there's a lot of people that come from other areas that school doesn't start as early as it does, like early August here. They'll start later August or in September. And then sometimes January is either crazy like this year or slow because people are recovering from Christmas. Other than that, we don't slow down. And December is a really busy month for us here because we have so many people transferring with jobs because there's so many businesses bringing their hubs here. So what are the new ones that are coming here? Whataburger, In-N-Out. There's a ton. And they come because of the schools and the level of employees that we can bring to them. Mark, what have you been seeing?
Well, for me, what has been happening, because we're in February, we're in the first week of February, what's going on is unexpected IRS debt. And it is wreaking havoc, and to say the least. Unfortunately, it's not an expense that people expected to have, and they're having to adjust to accommodating the debt.
So I have 100 questions about that. The first is, are you seeing this mostly with people who have self-employment or bonus type situations or W-2 people?
It's all over the board, Jennifer. It's W-2 folks working W-2 jobs. It is self-employed folks. It is, just underpaying their taxes. Yeah.
Well, and pardon my ignorance, when I was W-2'd, they pulled money. And I didn't usually have to pay, and sometimes I got a little bit back. I always told my kids that it's a fine line. You don't want to give the government an interest-free loan for too long, but you don't want to bring a bunch to the table. But they're like, my friend's getting back $5,000. I'm like, great, your friend loaned the government $5,000 at no interest. How's that sound for brilliant? I'm not going to go too far down that road, but how have they changed their withholding because of the economy, or is it just not being withheld? Or I'm not a tax person. I'm like, or is it that they're like, I don't want to think about it. It's coming, but I don't want to deal with it. And hopefully my boss is pulling the right amount, or did tax cuts and stuff roll off?
However they're getting there, it's a debt that they didn't count on. There might be people that are, that are doing side hustles. The amount of their side hustle is taking them into the next tax bracket.
That makes sense because they're tracking down the Venmo things that aren't gifts and all that.
Yeah. Another thing is, we're a country of financial illiteracy. I mean, Mark will tell you that right off the bat. So when you get a job, so when my daughter Ava got her job at Home Depot, what's the very first thing she does, Mark? They sit down that very first day. She gets out her driver's, her 2 forms of ID. She has a valid, and then they put a form in front of her called a W-4. And the W-4, she has to fill it out. Now, she's not had a class in high school that talks to you about what the W-4 is about. She's a freshman in college. She's having those classes this semester, mind you, because she changed her major. But she's going to decide right then. And all new employees, every time you go to a new job, they're like, okay, I need you to fill out, here's your W-4. And what you hear people say around the room, they're like, okay, well, just put a whole bunch of dependents down. That way they'll take less out.
Right.
Well, I don't have 6 kids. We'll put that down. It's hard. And Jennifer hit a note there. It is a hard time for people on the salary or the hourly type of income. And those are probably hacks that they see on TikTok and things like that. But the hack comes home to roost. And that's what Mark's telling us about.
Right.
That's my input. Mark, obviously the side hustle thing, but there's a lot of people, myself included, I didn't know what that form meant or how it impacted me.
So, and this may be like too long of a discussion. What do you do when your tax bill? I mean, I know you can try and negotiate with like a payment plan with the IRS, but it's a huge number and sometimes they won't do it. And then that obviously is going to impact if you're buying a home. Because that has to be paid off before you can do a loan, at least in my experience. And what do people do? Do they start selling things, doing another side hustle?
Yeah, so one of the things as a coach that we will walk through a person that's experiencing this is drive home the importance, asking the questions about what steps are they taking in order to avoid this in the future as number one. But number two, the next part of this is understanding the importance of IRS debt and the power that entity has. And it's not the same level of power as a credit card company.
No.
And so what we often do is elevate the IRS debt to the number one priority as to what to get off of your plate. It is the IRS. That's the number one priority. If anyone,
and that's because of what they can leverage as well as the interest they charge if they do work with you.
So that's a great point. So one of the things that I've found is some of the most the highest penalties, the highest fees the IRS comes with. They're one of the highest that's leveraged.
Yeah. And you can't talk to them.
Right.
I mean, I remember my dad, I worked a little bit in his office and I was in college. I had to do my taxes with his accountant. That was one of the things he said. And so we did. And this was back in 88, 89, a long time ago. Okay. Just leave it at that. Anyway. And it was when you didn't pull Social Security very well. Nobody pulled Social Security on self-employed. And then they came down with all the new tax things because the government was going broke yet again. And I got a bill, my dad must have done filing in October and an extension, but I got a bill in May, like 6 months later or 7 months later or whatever it is. And my bill was for $1,300, which was as much as a semester at Ohio State at the time, which is ridiculous on both of those statements. Yep. But I was like, but you know how much I owed originally in Social Security? It was like $400. But with interest and penalties, by the time they bothered to tell me I owed this, and I'm working and going, oh my God, what do I do? So what do you do when you're doing, when somebody's working with you to get from not yet to yes, or so that they can stay in a house and they have an IRS bill or I don't think, Mark, I got T-boned on Monday. Unfortunately, I'm okay, but when it's their fault and I have uninsured, but like, let's say that it was not their fault and I couldn't do, or what do you do when those situations arise? So that you're not going, forget it, I'm never gonna.
Yeah. So one of the very first things that you need to do is sit down and realize that the situation that you're in is temporary. It's not permanent. It's only permanent if you allow it to be permanent. The second thing to do is take an assessment of the impact, the overall impact of the new debt or the new situation. When it comes to the IRS, I don't want these people in my life. I treat them just plain and simple.
I don't want them to exist in the world, but that's a whole other story for history.
the second thing is, we've been talking, I brought up IRS debt, but the second thing is go back to one of your first questions is how are you evaluating? It's not hard to take your pay stub over to a tax accountant or a tax advisor and have them do an evaluation of what's being withheld from your check to determine whether or not you are taking out enough.
Yeah.
That's I would level that as a coaching challenge for anyone that came to me with
I know a guy.
that. Yeah. So the fourth thing to do is reach out and ask for help if you don't understand something. There's people like myself, people on this podcast, you and Lance, that are fully capable of jumping in and understanding the situation from an outside perspective. And then most importantly, brainstorming. What I have found to be the most effective interaction with my clients is brainstorming all of the options to overcome the obstacles.
Well, and it's interesting that you say that because I just had a conversation with somebody about covering a back deck. So nothing related to this, but the idea is. And they were talking about doing it one way, and I looked and I said, I don't know if you can do that way because of your yard. So I said, you have to state what your objective is. So the same kind of thing, your objective, because sometimes people, especially when it's something big and scary, it's reactionary. So sometimes the objective is, oh my God, I need to not think about the IRS. So sometimes the reaction is, I'm going to stick my head in the sand. Sometimes the reaction is, I'm just going to get money from anywhere. Maybe I'm going to get a payday loan. Maybe I'm going to do another a credit card advance or something that may not be the best beneficial way to do it. Or maybe we need to sit down and talk, okay, is this time to use some of a HELOC or I don't know, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so I want to talk to that for a reason. I am, even as a financial coach, okay if someone goes out and gets a loan to pay off the IRS to get them out of their lives.
But not necessarily a payday loan, a predatory, borderline predatory.
I'm not talking about, so let's back up a second, okay? When you're facing the situation, we're trying to get back to what is normal, right? Mm-hmm. You didn't expect to have an IRS debt or any other debt. And so you're often making decisions based on how do I get back to what is my comfort zone? Because you've just been thrown out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And now you have something new that you have to deal with. So you're often making those decisions. And so that's why I said the very first step to do is just stop. Assess the entire situation, because one of the things that I've learned as a coach from my clients is we often think that it's more worse. Is that a word? More worse?
It's worser. It's worser.
More worse than it really actually is.
Yeah.
And so take that in perspective. But I'm one of the things that I would rather see someone do is actually go get a loan for the IRS.
Well, and then that brings up another question. Lance, if somebody has a big outstanding bill to the IRS, can they get a HELOC, a new HELOC, if they don't have one in place? Generally.
Well, if they have a big fat bill. So what is a big fat bill? So if they have a payment plan in place, the payment plan can be considered, and yes. Sometimes they don't have a lien on the property. Sometimes there is a lien on the property. So when there's a lien on the property, I was excited to say this a little bit earlier, that you actually can buy another house when you have an IRS tax lien. In Tennessee, the IRS in the state of Tennessee, there's a loophole that allows people to buy a primary home even though they have a personal lien. It doesn't have to be like if you're you don't own property, or maybe you do, and the tax lien is against Mark Crater and not Mark Crater's property. Mm-hmm. You can go ahead and buy a house, but guess what? Where that lien's going to appear, it's now going to be against house. It's kind of brilliant from the IRS's aspect because they're now attaching to a real property, REO, real estate owned, and they will get their money the next time around when they go to sell. And I've actually done several of those where people had personal liens? Your answer is going to be, I mean, some banks will do it. If you have a payment plan, you're able to make the payments. They might say, we want you to pay off the debt with that HELOC, or they might not because you have a payment plan.
But if you had a HELOC in place already, then you could draw against it to pay the
Absolutely.
IRS.
You can use that money for anything you want.
And that's one of the things. I know, Mark, we're not trying to get people in a bunch of debt, but one of the things Lance and I talk about a lot is if you're a small business owner, particularly if you're equipment driven, I think it's a good idea to have a HELOC in place that you are not using, because one, it's good on your credit because you've got a untapped line of credit that, so there's like low, no balance. But when you need that, or you need the new truck or the new whatever, you can't go get it and it's one of those, you're like, well, good God, if I wasn't paying this $3,800 bill, I could pay this bill. And I'm asking you to pay this off because your interest is half, but it's not seen that way. So, and then that's the other thing too, is everybody's like, oh my God, a HELOC, that's so much more on the interest rate. And it is. But Lance, can you think of a time that a HELOC has had a higher interest rate than the IRS?
No.
Me neither.
When it comes to debts like the IRS, there is, because of the power that they have, I'm not messing around with that. I would rather set myself up on a regular payment with another form of debt than I would be paying the IRS. With that being said, and I just walked through a situation with a client where they couldn't see the tree through the forest. Okay.
Well, they're panicking.
Very, very easily. And this is the power of having an outside source like the two of you in your businesses and me as in my business. I just, the couple reached out and had been struggling with how to make a minimum payment to one of their creditors. Obviously, I'm not going to go into any of the details of it.
But it's a common enough scenario.
Right. But they couldn't see the tree through the forest. And so just by adjusting a few things and reprioritizing different debts and different payments, we actually came across a solution that is not only going to service the debt that they weren't able to make, but it actually made their debt pay off faster.
Right, which is educate, adapt, and overcome.
Right.
You think you're going down this path. You think this is the only way to do it. But when you bring in somebody else, like you in the financial coaching and Lance in the lending and me in trying to find a property you want, what's your objective? Oh, well, look, we can come around this way and get there. We don't have to blow through, 8-foot wall to get there. We can just walk around on this bridge over here.
Right.
Maybe we have to go uphill because it's an uphill bridge and it's a struggle, but it's not as hard or as impassable as, an 8-foot thick wall.
When you hit a bump in the road, and you have an emergency fund, that bump is no longer a bump. But there's criteria that has to meet. That have to be met in order for this to engage the emergency fund. When you have a fully funded emergency fund, it's not an investment account. It's money. You're buying insurance against Murphy. We talked a little bit about that last time, right? But you're buying insurance against the things that you don't expect, that are unexpected, and having that, it only becomes a inconvenience when you have a fully funded emergency fund. For example, just this past December, I may have even talked about this on an earlier podcast. Just this past December, I had a $4,000 heater repair. And because I had an emergency fund for that specific home, I was able to cash flow the repair. What am I doing now? I'm going back and I'm replenishing that emergency fund. So the form, because I have forms an emergency fund, I don't need debt. Yeah. And that's where life becomes your terms.
Well, and that's where you need somebody else to help. I think sometimes, especially when you have a spouse, this is or is this not an emergency, But But even if you're not talking about debt, I have an opportunity to go to a conference for real estate. I know it would do amazing things for my business. But I know I'm working on there are some debts from last year being slow that I want taken care of. I don't know. And when I added up the cost of the ticket and the housing, not even the getting there or the eating there, I think it was around $3,500. And so I had to say, who is that going to be, return on investment? And I said, it might be, but it's not enough for me to not throw that $3,500 at the debt and free that mental space so that I can track forward more strongly. And there will be another conference.
Yeah.
Well,
And if I don't have the mental space to apply what I learned at that conference, then it's going to be wasted money.
so one of the things that I don't hear a lot of people, and I'm just going to throw this out, ask about a virtual ticket to that same conference.
Yeah.
That might be an option. But
That's smart.
there's 3 things of criteria that I look for in making a decision on using my emergency fund. Number 1, was it unexpected? Number 2, is it truly an emergency? Unexpected, is it a need? And number 3, does it affect my employment? Does it affect what I'm going to be able to, my money, being able to get there?
And that's the thing, like I wouldn't have to go into debt to do this, but what I would have to do is not go less in debt to do it.
Right.
And if it was a criteria of my work, I would do it.
Yep.
You know what I mean? But I think that that's something that sometimes gets evaluated too, because if you make too many decisions like that, you can find yourself in debt even if you weren't.
Right. And it comes back to what I've found with my clients is getting back to that comfort zone. They want the problem to go away really fast. And so they'll make decisions in order to get back to that comfort zone. And I just, can't stress this enough, that is where, as a financial coach, that I can come in and look at it from the outside. And that's what I do with my clients.
Yeah. Well, and that's like when we first all met and I had told you about like the algorithms and then Lance dove into it more. I think that was new to you, that you need to, because a credit score is such a huge part of the house. And so many people I hear, I'm paying off all my debt and then I'm going to come talk to you and get a house. I'm like, slow your roll. We need to talk to Lance. If you have history major math, $1,000 and you have $2,500 in debt, where are you putting that $1,000? Because there are things that are going to make it. Do y'all ever play on a trampoline and do double bounce? Yes, you know what I'm talking about. There are things that you can do that $1,000 that's going to double bounce your credit score as opposed to just do it. And there are some things that can actually break the trampoline and you fall on your butt through it.
Yeah,
like closing a credit card that has good history.
Yep.
When you hit a bump in the road, when a bump shows up, it's what is our initial reaction to the bump?
Yeah.
I mean, when you hit the bump, is everything inside the car flying around, or are you buckled in? And it's an unexpected event, but you're going to get through it. You're going to get over the problem. It's how you're going to react to the inconvenience of that bump.
Yeah. And it's, and it's sometimes knowing how money works. So like, let's say that again, history major math, you're renting an apartment and it's $2,000 a month. And you're like, Mark, I want to buy a house. And you're like, okay, let's call Lance and see what you need to do. My rent ends in 6 months. And, we need to raise a credit score because, maybe you can buy, but it's going to be tight. And maybe you need to pay this, and this off for your income to debt ratio. And your mortgage may come up at like $2,300. And you're like, well, God, I'm going to be spending more on it. But Is your insurance included in the 2,000 that you just named on your rent? Your property taxes are, because you're paying them for the landlord anyway. But will you also get a different discount on your car insurance that makes that lower? And then also the most important thing is that extra 300 or 200 or whatever a month that you're paying. As a realtor, I can't guarantee you return on your investment, but I can say that historically, taking out the 20 and 21, historically, equity rise has been 3% increase. And so it's a good place to park your money while having security that in 6 months, your landlord isn't going to raise your rent $300 anyway.
You got me all excited, Jennifer. I literally had that conversation today.
Yes.
What triggered me was the customer's like, my rent is $2,280 and I need to buy a house in Nashville, 3.5% down, and that needs to be my total payment.
So that's what, about a $250,000 house?
$250, yeah.
Yeah, I can tell you they needed to go FHA too, I imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not playing that game again.
And the first questions I asked were, what's included in your apartment? Do you pay water? No, that's included. Okay, well, that's a bill you're going to have. So we're going to add what a water bill would be to that number. And do you pay electricity? Oh, that's part of my rent too. Okay, we're going to talk about that. How's that house heated? Well, I do pay for gas. Oh, okay. So it's over the years, I mean, I've learned I've got this scribble in front of me but it's a very detailed, we spoke for 57 minutes. This guy's like, I've spoken to other bankers. No one has taken the time to ask these questions. And I get all excited. I go out. We always say we should have a bell that we ring. And I didn't close the deal, but I love selling. And selling isn't a bad thing.
You helped him, and that's what you love.
And I love that euphoric feeling of, gosh, man, no one even had these discussions with me. And I will tell you, it sometimes happens. The people you spend a lot of time with, there are a few of those people that will take that knowledge and take it elsewhere. But for the most part, they will stick with you. And I've got this big smile on my face. And I love selling and helping people.
Yeah.
Can I hijack the conversation?
Selling someone, you're helping them understand benefit to them. Is this a benefit to them? That's why I always say, what's your goal? What are you looking at? I think we all do that. Mark, what's your goal? To get out of debt, to own a house. Okay, what's your goal? I want to own, 10 acres on the lake. Okay, well, we're probably not starting there. Lance, what's your goal? I want to have a $228,100 mortgage in Nashville. Okay, well, you can't get quite there, but let's talk about there's a lot of non-tenable, non-monetary value in the things that come with home ownership. Security, but it's not secure if you can't stay in your home and be prepared for things, or your house poor or whatever. Right. And that's where, one of the things that one of the sessions we talk about is house hunting expectations. And that's why, there's conflicting thoughts. Okay, Lance, I'm approved for $450,000. I only want to spend $375 because I only want to do that in my budget. Okay, is that a smart thing or a not smart thing? It depends. Like most things in life, maybe you need to spend $425 because, we're talking about a 3% growth equity. It's an exponential growth. So if it's 3% of 200,000 versus 3% of 300,000, again, that double bounce on the trampoline, what's your best overall?
Right.
Is it better to strap down for that first year or two and not do the Starbucks, that you can afford right now if you bought a 350 house, but maybe get that house that's a little nicer for you and would have more value in the future too, or is in better condition at 375, and not get not go out to dinner or to a concert or something once or twice a year that you could have normally done. It's a lifestyle versus a goal situation. And it doesn't mean that it's the same answer for everyone.
You're right. Can I hijack the conversation? We're at 34 minutes. We've got about 6 minutes.
Yeah.
Mark, I want his feedback on this. At the beginning, I said, hey, come back to me. I want to ask you something about how I address this. So I think we talked about this a couple sessions ago, and I'm going to totally shift gears again for a second. If you look up here at my little, let's see, right here, see what mine says? It says false spring.
Yeah.
And over here, Jennifer's, I can't point to, it says just a bump in the road.
Somewhere over here.
Mark Crater has nothing.
Well, what we're kind of speaking about is, things happen. Right. My fall spring is, gosh, it's 75 degrees and everyone's like, spring is here. Well, I'm here to tell you that it's not here. And after you lived in Tennessee long enough, number one, you will have allergies. This is not if, it's when. It might be year 7, it might be year 27, but you're going to have them. And the other thing is you're going to have fall spring and you're going to have Hell's Gate. Hell's Gate is August, when it feels like you're about to enter Hell's Gate. And we have a few other seasons. We'll talk about this. But Jennifer and I, and Mark too, we've experienced bumps in the road, false springs, false things that people they're not really clear with. And the good news is that we're talking to them. The three of us are actually talking to these people, and we are 3 people that can influence these people. I had a loan officer call me yesterday, a young man. He's been in the business about 7 years, and he is really struggling. And I'm struggling too. I'm just gonna face it, right? Mm-hmm. And God put me in the position yesterday to lift him up and talk about, dude, you're here. You are still here.
Yeah.
That's a win. He's like, but I don't.
Alive and kicking.
You're here, and we're going to get there. We're going to just keep, and this particular young man, he has I'm not going to out him, but he has this really fun icon and logo that he's created, and he will take pictures of himself around Nashville in the bars, not drinking. That's not right. He has a cowboy kind of logo, and he's like, I'm at so-and-so. And I said, brother, keep doing it. Social media is like that. He's like, I've been doing it for years. I said, it might take the years in one day till it finally hits. Yeah. And
that's like that thing where the guy's digging and he's like this far from the end and he stops.
Yep. Keep at it.
Well, and I think that's the thing too. You said that, well, I'm not going to spill any beans here. As a realtor, I don't get paid until closing day.
Right.
So I can work with the seller and have them under contract 3 times and have flaky buyers leave and them not relist with me. And I don't get reimbursed for my time, my pictures, my anything. I can run somebody all over the countryside in all kinds of weather and not get paid because they decide not to buy. They move out of state. They squirrel off and buy new construction. They rent. They go to whatever it is that they do. So I think that we understand that when people come to us, not that we want to, we can deal with people who don't have financial problems. I have plenty of those clients too. But what this podcast is about is letting people know that they have this ability to get, and we're a team that's working with them to help. We understand bumps in the road. We understand false springs. We understand unexpected IRS dues. I know I had a year or two where I was like, dang, I did how much? That's not what I was thinking I did.
You wanted my feedback on that lesson, what you had an opportunity to feed into that conversation. Injecting hope and continuing to help people, guide them, and giving them the opportunity to find that intrinsic motivation to get to where they are is absolutely at the core of my business. And one of the reasons why I have the clients that I have is because there's not I'm not going to be the one that gets you your results. You're going to be the one that gets you your results. However, what I'm not going to do is not let you not get your results. Does that make sense?
That brings me to another thing, and I'll use a Nashville scenario on this. You inject hope, and Lance, yes, this kid should stay in mortgage, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you do with the person whose family is spiraling out into debt and it is bad because they want to be the next big thing?
Jennifer, you
have that realistic conversation. I want you to follow your dreams, but dude, your family's burning down around you.
No, you have to have that a realistic conversation. You've got to understand the situation that you're in, and it's not designed. One of the things that my clients all tell me, Mark, I love your accountability. You always call me to action. You always put something in front of me to make. We'll sit here and we'll lay out all of the options, but the one thing that you always come back and do is you always say, which option are you going to choose?
Mm-hmm.
And when you're having someone spiraling out of control, some of the times it's just to let them know that someone is here that can walk with them. That I'm going to go back.
Well, I'm saying when they're like, I'm doing this, I'm not, I'm good.
That I wanted to go back to is we often think things are worse than they really are. When someone can see it from the outside perspective. Let me give you an example. I had a lady that was unfortunately facing jail time. She just got let go of her job, and the CPS, Child Protection Services, was over at her house getting ready to take the child and hand it over to her ex-husband. Okay.
I'd have been facing jail time on something.
Okay. That situation, she didn't care about what she needed was, and by the way, she walked out from being let go. The left front tire of her car had low air.
Yeah.
She had no air in the tire. So she needed someone to just listen to how bad her day was.
Yeah.
And just to remind her, no guarantee, but the sun's going to come up tomorrow.
Yeah.
Probably pretty sure that the sun's going to come up tomorrow, and you're going to have a new set of 24 hours. And sometimes just having someone, I sat on the phone with this woman until she got over to the car care garage and asked the guy, can you put air in my tire while I go home?
Mm-hmm.
Because the next day she wasn't going to be there.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff is where just bringing a sense of peace to someone to let them know you care. And that it may be where we're at right now, but tomorrow is going to be different. And you don't have to stay. The point of transformation in my clients is when they say, I don't want to be here anymore.
Right. And I've asked this before, but I think it's a good way to kind of summarize this this episode. What do you do when someone says, Mark, I want to do this, but I'm in debt. So how am I going to be able to be in debt and get rid of debt while I'm engaging your services because you're so much money or whatever?
You have to find, it's what you just asked is surface level.
Mm-hmm.
What you have to find is below the surface, the desire. I don't know if I've ever explained my story, and I'll just briefly explain it.
Mm-hmm.
I had $323,000 worth of debt, and I paid it off in 5.5 years.
I'm assuming that's not a mortgage or was a mortgage too.
Part of that debt was 2 rental properties, but they weren't the highest debts.
Yeah.
My student loans were my highest debts.
Sure.
When I 5 years, 63 months of $5,000 a month, that's $315,000.
Yeah.
And
that was fun, wasn't it? That was good times, wasn't it?
It was brutal. It was brutal, yeah. but none of it had to deal with making the money to pay it. Everything had to deal with what was inside. Mm-hmm. I don't, where I was headed. And let me, for anyone out there listening, you can check out my story on aspirecoaching.com. I also did a debt-free scream on Ramsey Solutions. You can see that video as well. But what I can say to people, anyone that's listening right now, is if you want something, how badly do you want it? Because in order to get to where you want to go, it has to be, there's a core level that you have to find. I paid off $323,000 and because of the motivation that I set. I'm a man of perseverance, I'm a man of commitment, and I'm a man of discipline. That's what my journey discovered for me. It had nothing to do with the money.
I think we should cut it off today and come back to an episode. I want to talk with Mark online with people about debt consolidation. He's not a fan of it. He's told us about that earlier. I want to kind of show you some of the things I've put together, what I see, and changing someone. It's going to be a good conversation. So it's a false spring. Maybe I'm having a false spring. I've done a lot of debt consolidations over the year. We talked about that last month. The average debt's 29%, and I've got a lot of clients at 60,000 plus in revolving, but they've got a 2.25% mortgage and $800,000 of equity.
Yeah.
Anyway, so let's call it a day. And,
yep. So I'm not positive our topic next week. We've talked about a lot of special sessions, so we're probably going to bring something fun and interesting to you. Then the week after that is a foundation title person is going to be talking to us about things that arise during title searches and how to protect yourself. Then we'll start our cycles back again with steps to buying, apt to funding, not yet to yes. And just do it cyclically. And each time, even though we're covering the same topics, there'll be different, first of all, what's been going on in the world, but also we delve into different aspects of it. So until next week.
It's been great, guys.
Yeah, it was a great time.
For sure.
Great meeting. Great session.